Went overseas for negotiations for a month and came back a week early. It was already late at night when I got home. The house was dark and it seemed that my girlfriend had fallen asleep. I took a shower and tiptoed to the bed. Without turning on the light, I carefully got into bed. The warmth and fragrance inside the quilt made me feel excited. After abstaining from sex for a month, I felt so burning in my heart that I couldn't bear it anymore. Plus, I drank some wine before going home, so my desire to fight was particularly strong. The battle lasted until the early morning, when I fell into a deep sleep. Although the process felt a little different. The sound doesn't seem right. But I was dizzy at the time and didn't pay much attention to it. Until someone woke me up the next day. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw my girlfriend's best friend shyly calling me to have breakfast. I was completely dumbfounded. 1. At this moment, I was embarrassed. I had nothing on under the covers, so I had to say, "Luli, why don't you go out first and I'll come out right away?" Luli didn't know why, but his face suddenly turned red. Quickly retreated. I lifted the quilt and suddenly my eyes widened. I saw some red spots on the bed sheet. Thinking about it, the other person's figure seemed to be better than my girlfriend's last night. The skin is also more delicate and smooth. I remembered what my ex-girlfriend Siyao said. She said, "Luli is really conservative. It's a different era now, but he still wants to save his first time for the day of marriage." I was also quite surprised at that time. After all, in our circle, it is not uncommon for rich ladies to have fun outside. But there are not many people like Luli who keep themselves clean. I was startled for nothing. Could it be that the person last night was my girlfriend's best friend Luli? Calculating the time, my girlfriend's menstrual period is not during these days. The more I thought about it, the more something seemed wrong. After washing up, I went to the living room and asked tentatively, "Luli, where is Siyao?" Luli's eyes suddenly became a little flustered. She didn't dare look at me, and after a long while she stammered, "Sister Siyao went to the company early in the morning and said there was an emergency meeting to be held." Then she whispered something in an attempt to cover up her mistake. I slept in the guest room last night." Although I was still a little suspicious, I didn't ask any more questions when I saw that the other party didn't admit it. After a quick breakfast, I returned to the company. But I found that my girlfriend Siyao had not arrived yet, and I felt a pang in my heart. Could it be that Luli was panicking? But without giving it much thought, I called an emergency meeting. Although a preliminary cooperation intention has been reached for the overseas acquisition project, the letter of intent will not be signed until 3 days later. The contract for the big project in Northern Park will also have to wait 3 days to be signed. In order to ensure that everything goes smoothly, many details and project plans need to be explained. Halfway through the meeting, Siyao came with her white moonlight. The meeting was forcibly interrupted. She glanced at me disdainfully and walked straight to the stage. She pulled Bai Yueguang Li to her side and introduced him. "Everyone, this is my newly appointed vice president of the company, Li Zhe. All company affairs will be handled by Li Zhe in the future." While Siyao was talking, the two held hands. She didn't mean to avoid me, her official boyfriend. 2. The entire management of the company was stunned. Because I am the current vice president of the company. They all know that without me, Gu's enterprise would have gone bankrupt long ago. I was completely stunned. After I realized what was happening, my face looked very ugly. I slammed the table. "Siyao, what do you mean?" In my rage, I called her by her full name. Siyao turned her head and looked at me arrogantly. "What do you think it means? The company is now completely different from what it was before. It has entered a period of rapid development. Li Zhe has returned from overseas studies and is more suitable for the position of vice president than you." I almost laughed out of anger. When Gu's enterprise was on the verge of bankruptcy, Li Zhe was the company's vice president. Seeing that the situation was not right, he ran away with a large sum of money under the pretext of studying abroad. Siyao was so angry that she almost vomited blood. It was a fatal blow to Gu's enterprise, and bankruptcy was almost inevitable. Siyao drinks to drown her sorrows every day. I had liked her since college, and after learning about her experience, I rejected the marriage arranged by my family. When I found her in the bar, she was surrounded by a few thugs with bad intentions and was drunk and unconscious. I brought her back. I invested a large sum of money in Gu's enterprise, which was on the verge of bankruptcy. In the past 3 years, I have worked hard for Gu's enterprise. There were several times when I drank so much that I had to be hospitalized in order to win big projects. Eventually he led the company to a successful listing. The current Gu enterprise is no longer what it used to be. Moreover, in the past 3 years, I have taken great care of Gu Siyao and treated her like a treasure. Unexpectedly, Li Zhe came back shamelessly again and easily gained Gu Siyao's trust. When I went overseas to discuss a project, I'm afraid they had already gotten together. Think about all the hard work I put in over the years, and what I got in return was ruthless betrayal. When Li Zhe saw me sneering, he pushed me away. The other hand was around Gu Siyao's slender waist, feeling indescribably proud. Thank you for taking care of Siyao and the company for me for so many years. Now that you are no longer the vice president, why are you still standing here? You really have no sense at all. Looking at Li Zhe's smug expression, a surge of anger rushed to my head. I kicked him away. Li Zhe rushed towards me like crazy. 3. The meeting room suddenly became a mess. It took them a while to pull us apart. Gu Siyao protected Li Zhe and glared at me resentfully. Then he looked at Li Zhe with great heartache. Li Zhe, how are you? Zhao Heng, you really go too far. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and took a step forward. I went too far. Gu Siyao, check your conscience, how have I treated you over the past few years? Your Gu's enterprise almost went bankrupt. Who invested in it and saved it? When Li Zhe ran away with the money without caring about your life or death, who was there to stay with you in your darkest hour? Gu Siyao didn't dare to look up out of guilt, but her voice was full of mockery. So what if it's you? Did I ask you to help me? Didn't you do it willingly? I laughed when I heard Gu Siyao say this. It was a sad smile. When Gu's enterprise was at its darkest point, I plunged in without hesitation. In the past few years, I have worked very hard for Gu's enterprise and seldom went home. Now that Gu's enterprise has signed the overseas merger and acquisition and Northern Park project, the entire company will surely move to a higher level. At this critical moment, I ended up being abandoned. I really deserve it. The company's management looked at me with sympathy. But Gu Siyao is the chairman, so they can't say much. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Gu Siyao felt more confident. He made the final decision, it's settled. 3 days later, Li Zhe will preside over the signing of the letter of intent for the overseas acquisition project and Beifanjiwen. Zhao Heng, you can be Li Zhe's assistant. Quickly vacate the office. After Gu Siyao finished speaking, she didn't look at me again. Turned around and left. I knew Gu Siyao didn't mean to discuss it, she was just informing me. Li Zhe walked up to me with his nose in the air. He said proudly, even if you have devoted countless efforts to the company and Gu Siyao in the past 3 years, isn't it just making wedding clothes for me? Just be my assistant. If you do well, I will let you stay in the company. Otherwise, there will be no place for you in the entire Gu Corporation. I watched Li Zhe walk out of the meeting room arrogantly and suddenly laughed. Gu Siyao, you haven't learned your lesson after falling down once. You want to die, I wonder who will save you this time. Since I was able to build up the entire Gu Corporation, I naturally have the ability to completely destroy Gu Corporation. When I leave the meeting room, I saw Li Zhe and a group of people cleaning out all the things in my office. I looked at the mess coldly. The days and nights when I worked hard for Gu's company flashed before my eyes like a kaleidoscope. Li Zhe stood aside, with his arms folded across his chest, a mocking look of a winner on his face. He commanded that group of people as if the company was his world. I looked at him calmly. The anger in his eyes was gone, leaving only a chilling coldness. 3 days later, I will show you who is the one who truly controls the fate of the Gu family. 4. In the end, my workstation was arranged together with the clerk. My seat was right next to Luli. She was furious when she saw Li Zhe's smug look. Brother Zhao Heng, are you really going to give him the position of vice president? It's obvious from the first glance that Li Zhe has no ability. If we leave the company to him, it will be the end of us. There was no ripple on my face, and I said calmly, "It's just right that it's over. I saved Gu Siyao once, and I won't save her a second time." Lu Li looked surprised. "Brother Zhao Heng, can you really let it go? You used to be reluctant to let Gu Siyao suffer even the slightest bit of grievance." I looked at the busy scene outside the window and suddenly felt a little sad. You said, "That was in the past, it won't happen again in the future." I only found out today that the person Gu Siyao loves the most in her heart will always be Li Zhe. After saying that, I turned to look at Lu Li and said seriously, "Lu Li, I'm sorry." When Lu Li heard my apology, she instantly burst into tears. 3 years ago, the person my parents forced me to marry was Lu Li. Lu Li and I are childhood sweethearts, and we grew up together. She always follows me wherever I go. But after graduating from high school, she went abroad with her parents. I just returned to China 3 years ago. Although Lu Li is prettier than Gu Siyao, her family background is also better than Gu Siyao. But at that time, I was madly obsessed with Gu Siyao like a possessed person. It broke Lu Li's heart. After hearing that I refused to marry her, Lu Li fell seriously ill. Later, Lu Li also came to Gu's enterprise and became good friends with Gu Siyao. I know that Lu Li must have given up her status as a young lady and come to work as a small employee in Gu's enterprise for me. But Gu Siyao doesn't know about what happened between me and Lu Li. In the past few years, I have been deliberately keeping a distance from Lu Li in the company. After a while, Li Zhe sent a photo. It turned out to be a photo of him and Gu Siyao in bed. I was so angry that I almost went crazy. Then he sent me another text, which made my eyes widen even more. "Last night, Siyao was so gentle." My head buzzed. Gu Siyao was with Li Zhe last night, so who was with me last night? With a complicated expression, I showed the message on my phone to Lu Li. Lu Li's face immediately turned red, and she lowered her head, not daring to look at me. After a long while, he stammered, "I was supposed to sleep with Gu Siyao last night, but then Li Zhe called her away." "So that person last night was you?" Lu Li's face turned even redder, and she hummed softly. I suddenly grabbed Lu Li's hand and looked at her seriously. "Ari, I was a bastard before. But I won't let you down again this time." Lu Li's tears, which had just stopped, suddenly burst out again. I sent a message back to Li Zhe. "I'll give you the garbage I threw away." 5. In the evening, Gu Siyao arranged a grand inauguration party for Li Zhe. There is no shortage of fence-sitters in the company who try to curry favor with Li Zhe. Encouraged by these people, Gu Siyao and Li Zhe drank from the wedding cup. Li Zhe's left hand was around Gu Siyao's slender waist. After they drank the wedding wine, Li Zhe looked at me provocatively. He hugged Gu Siyao and kissed her. Those fence-sitters cheered instantly. "Gu Siyao, don't go too far, Zhao Heng is still here." Lu Li couldn't bear to watch it anymore and said angrily. The lively atmosphere became eerily quiet, and everyone turned to look at me. To their surprise, there was no expression on my face. Instead, he asked in confusion, "Why are you all looking at me? You guys continue." There was a hint of surprise in Gu Siyao's eyes. She probably thought I would be furious. After all, if I had seen this scene in the past, I would have gone crazy. But in fact, after you really let go of someone, you really don't care that much. I gave so much to Gu Siyao in the past, but what did I get in the end? Gu Siyao didn't hold back at all. She hugged Li Zhe's neck and kissed him back. I didn't dare to show weakness and hugged Lu Li and kissed her passionately. Everyone in the audience widened their eyes. After all, everyone knows that Lu Li is Mr. Gu's best friend. No one in the company has ever seen me and Lu Li getting close. And looking at Lu Li's appearance, he didn't resist at all. He even put his arms around my neck. What is going on? Lu Li is the recognized goddess of the company. She is beautiful and single. She drives a sports car to work. You can tell at first glance that she is a rich second generation. She is the dream lover of many people in the company. At this moment, I seem to hear the sound of a heart breaking. Lu Li and I had been kissing passionately for less than a minute when the table was overturned. Fortunately, I was quick to act and pulled Lu Li aside. The others were not so lucky and were all covered in the soup. "It's Gu Siyao." Her face turned livid, and she stared at me and Lu Li. I met Gu Siyao's knife-like gaze, and a sense of revenge surged in my heart. The corner of his mouth curled up in a mocking arc, and he deliberately hugged Lu Li tighter. Lu Li's delicate body trembled slightly, but she cooperated with me. Her cheeks were flushed, not sure if it was because of nervousness or something else. Gu Siyao, what are you doing? I spoke coldly, with undisguised provocation in my voice. You can be affectionate with Li Zhe, but I can't be close to Lu Li. Gu Siyao was so angry that her chest heaved violently. She pointed at me, her fingertips trembling. Okay, one is my boyfriend and the other is my best friend. How dare you betray me? Have you two bitches been having an affair for a long time? I sneered. What have we done to you? You were the one who was heartless first, and now you're questioning me. Seeing this, Li Zhe, who was standing by, wanted to step forward to smooth things over, but Gu Siyao shook his hand away. Lu Li, you are really my best friend. Lu Li bit her lower lip, raised her head, and looked at Gu Siyao with a firm gaze. Gu Siyao, you are going too far. You don't know how much brother Zhao Heng has done for you. At this time, colleagues around were already in an uproar. There were whispers and discussions one after another. This sudden farce caused the whole scene to be in chaos. But I know in my heart that the war has just begun. I was too lazy to pay attention to her, so I took Lu Li's hand and left. Gu Siyao yelled from behind. If you dare to get out of this door, don't even think about coming back. You are fired. Lu Li and I didn't hesitate at all and strode out. 6. A small Gu enterprise is nothing compared to our Zhao family and Lu family. It's just that Gu Siyao didn't know that most of the Zhao and Lu family's industries were overseas. What she saw was just the tip of the iceberg. Soon, Gu Siyao regretted it. 3 days later, Gu's enterprise held a signing ceremony for the letter of intent. The high-spirited Li Zhe made a brilliant appearance and stole the spotlight. But he was slapped in the face unexpectedly. Representatives from Beifanjiwen and overseas companies saw that their partners had temporarily changed someone to preside over the signing ceremony. I quit on the spot. No matter how Gu Siyao and Li Zhe tried to persuade him, the other party remained tough. There is no sign of loosening. The representatives had stern expressions, their eyes revealing undisguised dissatisfaction and doubt. The person in charge of the Northern Park threw the contract document in his hand directly onto the table, and the document hit the table with a dull bang sound. Everyone present was shocked. The contact person we agreed upon in advance is Mr. Zhao. Ms. Gu, the most important thing in doing business is integrity. With such a temporary change of personnel, it is hard for us to believe that the subsequent cooperation can proceed smoothly. The person in charge of the Northern Garden spoke sharply and showed no mercy to Gu Siyao. The representative of the overseas company also spoke up, speaking a fluent foreign language, and the translator hurriedly followed suit. We originally valued Gu's stable and professional team for this cooperation. Now that you have changed your generals at the last minute, we have great doubts about your decision-making system. This signing is over now. As soon as these words were spoken, there was an uproar at the scene. Many employees who were not used to Li Zhe's superior attitude watched the scene with schadenfreude. Gu Siyao was so anxious that she could only look to Li Zhe for help. But Li Zhe was at a loss at the moment, his face turned pale, and he had no idea how to respond. Gu Siyao was so anxious that she had no choice but to call me. At this moment, I was hugging Lu Li and basking in the sun at the beach, and I just hung up. In the end, the signing representative walked away in anger. The signing ceremony turned into a joke. I am not surprised at all by this result. After all, for Beifanjiwen and overseas companies, Gu's enterprise is not the best choice. There are many companies that want to cooperate with them, so at worst they can just switch to another one. The reason why I cooperated with Gu's company was that I spent a whole year and put in countless efforts to gain their trust. Now the basis for cooperation is gone. How is it possible to sign a contract? 7. It was half a month later when I returned to Jiangcheng. I had just arrived home when Gu Siyao came to my door. It seems that she has been hiring someone to keep an eye on my house during this period of time. At this moment, Gu Siyao looked much more haggard. Zhao Heng, you have been with Lu Li these days, right? Where have you been these days? Do you know how much loss the company suffered from the failure to sign contracts for the Northern Park and overseas acquisition projects? How dare you not answer my call? She opened her mouth to question, her eyes seemed to be spitting fire. I looked at her indifferently and said lightly. Boss Gu, it was you who gave the project to Lise. Besides, I have already been fired by you, why are you still looking for me? Gu Siyao was so choked by my cold response that she was speechless for a long time. Her lips trembled slightly, she took a deep breath, and her tone softened a little. Zhao Heng, I was impulsive before. But you know the company's current situation. Without you, the partners won't buy into it. We can't let these projects fail like this. I sneered. Mr. Gu, you thought of me now. When you let Lise take the position, I didn't see you hesitate at all. Why, you only turned back after hitting a wall. There was a flash of anger in her eyes, but she suppressed it. I was wrong, but you can't just watch Gu's fall into despair. As long as you are willing to come back, you can set any conditions you want. I looked straight into her eyes with a gloomy face, without a trace of warmth in my eyes. Gu Siyao, you just wiped out all my efforts with just one word of dismissal. Now that you are in trouble, you want me to clean up the mess. How can it be so easy? What do you think of me, Zhao Heng? Gu Siyao was completely annoyed. I had been obedient to her all these years and had never spoken to her in such an attitude. Zhao Heng, I won't tell you about the company's affairs for now. You have been staying with Luli all this time, right? You and that bitch have been having an affair for a long time, no wonder you just disappeared when I told you to fire you, you scumbag. You actually cheated on me with my best friend, and you kept saying you loved me all these years. You are so hypocritical. Seeing that I ignored her, Gu Siyao became angry. Zhao Heng, aren't you angry just because Lise returned to the company? Is it necessary to make such a fuss? You're busy with work every day, and you go on a business trip overseas for a month. Don't I need someone to accompany me? 8. I looked at the time and was speechless. Who am I working so hard for? But I don't want to say anything more at this moment. Mr. Gu, please leave. It's late, and it's not good for you to stay here. After all, we have no relationship anymore. Gu Siyao was deflated and pretended to look pitiful. Zhao Heng, please ignore Luli, okay? Everyone knows that she is my best friend. I am really embarrassed by your behavior. You'd better come back. The company is also your hard work. I won't let you be Lise's assistant. You are not in the company, and many contracts have not been signed. The company needs you, and I need you too. I am not at all surprised that the company has found itself in its current situation in such a short period of time. In fact, if Gu's enterprise had left me and been replaced by a capable person, this wouldn't have happened. But Lise can't. As long as Lise is there, Gu Enterprise is a ship that will sink sooner or later. I shook my head and pointed in the direction of the gate. Please go back, Mr. Gu. My indifferent tone immediately deflated Gu Siyao, but she still made a final attempt. Heng, just help me. They haven't found anyone to sign a contract for the North Park and overseas acquisition projects yet. Can you treat this as a request from you? In fact, if I discussed the conditions with Gu Siyao at this time, even if I asked her to exchange part of her shares, she would definitely agree. But I won't do that. Signing the contract now would be tantamount to dragging these companies into the water. And before the ship sinks, I'll give them one more push. I know you're angry that Lise occupied your office. I'll get you a bigger one after the contract is signed. As long as you don't meet again in the future, I won't pursue the matter between you and Luli, is that okay? I showed her the bed photo of Li Zifa and said coldly. Mr. Gu, you wanted someone to accompany you, and Lise did it. And you said yourself that Lise's business ability is better than mine. You should go find him, right? I've been fired by you, and you've successfully hooked up with your white moonlight. So it's my freedom to be with whomever I want, and I don't need your interference. As for changing offices, do you think I still care? Please get out of here right now, or I'll have to call the police. Zhao Heng, you bastard. Gu Siyao screamed. She never expected that I would be so heartless after licking her for so long. If these contracts cannot be signed, the company will face losses. You said you would take care of me for the rest of my life, how can you just ignore me? You've put so much effort into the company, how can you give up halfway? I don't want to talk any more nonsense. I took out my cell phone and prepared to call the police. Seeing that I was determined not to turn back, Siyao left with a look of resentment on her face. 9. I watched her leave coldly, and couldn't understand why I was so crazy about her in the past. She abandoned me and betrayed me for Bai Yueguang, and now wants me to go back and work for her like a slave. How ridiculous. Not only will I not help her, I will also push her further. Just half an hour after Siyao left, Li Zai's phone rang like crazy. Just pinch it off, hit it again, and pinch it again. After repeating this for more than 10 times, he finally stopped hitting me. He sent a message, defiantly asserting his sovereignty. Zhao Heng, you are so shameless. Don't think that just because Siyao comes to see you today, you will be able to come back. I'm telling you, even if you come back, as long as I'm here, you won't have a good life in the company. Damn it, a bootlicker dares to snatch my woman. Looking at the message, I sneered, a piece of trash, he came here to seek death. I pulled out my cell phone and called my assistant overseas. I have already investigated Li Zai's overseas affairs in the past few days. He lied to Siyao that he was studying abroad, but in fact this guy was a complete scumbag. This guy is cheating people for money and women abroad, and a dozen cruel rich women are looking for him all over the world. He couldn't stay abroad, so he returned home. After hanging up the phone, I played with the lighter in my hand. The metal shell made a slight cold sound when rubbed against the fingertips. Every blow seemed to hit Li Zai's precarious fate. I want to see how long this ignorant guy can keep jumping around. It didn't take long before the news came back one after another. The assistant was extremely efficient and had already secretly contacted those wealthy women who had been badly cheated by Li Zai. He also kindly revealed Li Zai's current whereabouts in the country. I can almost imagine it. When those rich ladies heard the news, their eyes burned with rage, and they were ready to eat Li Zai alive. The next day I started selling the Gu Enterprise stocks I held. The current situation of Gu's enterprise is still unclear to the outside world, and its stock price is still fluctuating at a high level. Once Northern Park and overseas companies have identified new partners. Once Gu's Enterprise's third quarter performance report is released, the stock price will inevitably plummet. If I take action again at that time, I will suffer heavy losses. 10. Siyao and Li Zai were in the office, at a loss as to what to do regarding the project contract. At this moment, there was an urgent knock on the office door. Boss Gu, something terrible has happened. Boss Zhao has sold off a large amount of the company's stock, causing the stock price to plummet. Financial Director Wang Chang said anxiously. Siyao signaled Li Zai to open the door. Siyao said casually. What a fuss. Zhao Heng only owns 15% of the shares. Even if he sells them all, how much impact will it have? Wang Chang's face still looked very ugly. Boss Gu, you rarely ask about the company's affairs. In the past 3 years, Mr. Zhao has gradually bought out many shares from other shareholders, and also repurchased a lot of shares that were listed on the market. Now Mr. Zhao holds a 38% stake, but in fact he is the largest shareholder. Mr. Zhao's frantic selling behavior is obviously. Wang Chang looked at Siyao and didn't dare to say anything else. Siyao's expression changed completely. This Zhao Heng is going to put the company to death. She never thought that I was the company's largest shareholder. Not to mention the vice president, even if it was her chairman's position, it should be me. How is it possible? Since Zhao Heng is the largest shareholder of the company, why did he give up the position of vice president so easily? Could it be that Zhao Heng had already planned to destroy the company at that time? Only now did Siyao realize what a stupid mistake she had made. This Zhao Heng is so scheming. Siyao was regretting so much at this moment. Her eyes were red, and she shouted loudly, hurry up and buy back all that Zhao Heng sold. Li Zai was also completely dumbfounded. Wang Chang looked very unhappy. He stammered for a long time, and finally spoke under Siyao's murderous gaze. Mr. Gu, the company doesn't have that much cash flow. The company has expanded rapidly in recent years and funds have been tight. The bank loan is also about to expire. Mr. Zhao's behavior of selling a large number of stocks will inevitably lead to a sharp drop in the stock price. Even if I go to a bank for a loan now, I'm afraid I won't be able to get one. Gu Siyao stood there in a daze, completely stunned. The air in the conference room seemed to freeze. Everyone was overwhelmed by the heavy atmosphere. Li Zhe hesitated for a moment and said, "Siyao, the current situation is all my fault. If I hadn't come back, Zhao Heng wouldn't have left. How can I blame you? I underestimated Zhao Heng." Gu Siyao gnashed her teeth in hatred. She took out her cell phone tremblingly and called me frantically. But how could I possibly answer it at such a critical moment? Being soft-hearted is a big taboo. I hung up on her one by one. Gu Siyao was so angry that she was shaking all over as she listened to the busy tone coming from her phone. She smashed the phone against the wall with a bang. The phone was shattered into pieces, with the battery and body parts scattered all over the floor. Everyone around was shocked. "Zhao Heng, you bastard!" She roared at the top of her lungs, her usually delicate makeup now looking hideous due to her rage. 11. After a brief catharsis, Gu Siyao forced herself to calm down. She was silent for a while, then gritted her teeth and said, "We can't just sit there and wait for death. Wang Chang, go and compile a list of the company's current liquid assets, including those realizable assets, including real estate and idle equipment. Count them all and give them to me in an hour." "Yes, Mr. Gu." Wang Chang responded and left the meeting room in a hurry, his steps somewhat flustered. Then, Gu Siyao looked at Li Zhe again, and her tone became softer. "You should contact those small and medium shareholders, be sincere, and tell them the truth about the current predicament. See if we can convince them to increase their holdings and stabilize the share price. No matter what method we use, there must be progress." Li Zhe had no choice but to nod and walked out dejectedly. Gu Siyao, who was left alone in the conference room, slumped in her chair, holding her head in her hands. Could it be that I was really wrong? I didn't expect that the company would decline so quickly without Zhao Heng. But there's no use regretting now. She must cheer up and find a way to survive in this desperate situation. Just then, the secretary knocked on the door gently. With some hesitation, he said, "Boss Gu, several important suppliers called to inquire about the payment for the goods. They said, if we delay any further, we will have to terminate the cooperation." Gu Siyao's heart sank to the bottom in an instant. If suppliers collectively stopped supplying, then the Gu family would really have no way out. Gu Siyao had to split up the company's business and sell it off in a package in order to generate cash flow. This will stabilize the suppliers. Although the current difficulties have been temporarily resolved, the company's stock price has been halved. Immediately afterwards, Gu Enterprise's third quarter performance report was released. The company suffered heavy losses and its stock price plummeted again. The formation of the Great Snow Mountain requires years of sedimentation, but once an avalanche occurs, it can happen overnight. Faced with another sharp drop in stock prices, Gu Siyao was already exhausted from coping. At this time, Gu Siyao remembered how good I was. She always feels relaxed when I'm in the company. There is no need to worry about these things at all. She now suddenly realized that after I left, the entire company had gradually gotten out of control. As a last resort, she had to call me again. "Heng, where are you? I really want to see you." It's Gu Siyao's call. What bad luck. I wanted to hang up, but Luli picked up the phone. "Gu Siyao, please don't call me again, brother Zhao Heng is busy." Since the last party, Gu Siyao called Luli once and they had a big fight. The relationship between the besties has completely broken down, and now they are almost like enemies. I have been with Luli all this time and I have also told my family about it. Now the Zhao and Lu families are happily arranging our wedding. At this moment, Luli and I are having an in-depth communication. Gu Siyao's call was really disappointing. After hanging up the phone, Gu Siyao still called me relentlessly. I decisively blocked her. The two continued to linger. 12. Today is Valentine's Day. I bought a big bouquet of roses. As soon as I walked out of the flower shop, Gu Siyao blocked my way. She looks very haggard now, and her big, bright eyes have become dull. Until now, I really can't remember why I was so crazy about her. "Heng, today is Valentine's Day, are you here to buy me flowers? I know you can't let me go. I forgive you. Will you come back?" I pushed her away coldly. "Mr. Gu, please respect yourself. I'm afraid my fiancé will misunderstand. Gu Siyao went crazy and snatched the flowers from my hand. Throw it on the ground and stomp on it hard. Fiancé. It's that bitch Luli, right? Are you still going to marry her? Zhao Heng, you are mine, and you can only marry me. I watched the farce in front of me coldly without saying a word. Although the flowers are ruined, they are not expensive. I can just buy another bouquet later. Seeing that I ignored her, Gu Siyao finally stopped her crazy behavior and came over pitifully to pull my sleeve. Ah Heng, come back to me. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have brought Lise back, but you also got involved with my best friend, didn't you? Let's just pretend nothing happened. Can we go back to the way things were? I was amused by her train of thought. He shook her hand away suddenly, his eyes showing disgust without disguising it. Gu Siyao, who brought Lise into the company and kicked me out. Gu Siyao widened her eyes, tears welling up in her eyes. She seemed to still be struggling to make amends. Ah Heng, my heart and eyes are full of you now. As long as you are willing to come back, I promise that you will have the final say in the company from now on. Let's continue to make the company bigger and stronger together like we did before, okay? I sneered. Your promise is worthless. I once offered my sincerity to you, but you threw it away. What's the point of saying this now? I can't go back now, don't bother to disgust me anymore. Even after I said this, Gu Siyao still didn't give up. Ah Heng, I know you're still angry. You know, I still have you in my heart, so stop making trouble, okay? Only now did I realize how annoying she was, and I pushed her away. That's enough, Gu Siyao. Let's both keep some dignity and stop bothering me. This time the force was a bit stronger. Gu Siyao fell to the ground, tears dripping down her cheeks. Ah Heng, the company can't do without you, can you come back and help me? I was really wrong, please. I sneered and looked at Gu Siyao without a trace of pity. At this time, a few onlookers had gathered around, pointing and talking at us. Gu Siyao seemed to sense the embarrassment as well. But she still knelt down and reached out to grab my trouser leg. Ah Heng, this is my last request to you. Hundreds of employees in the company are waiting for their meals. Those who have worked hard with us all the way, can you bear to see them lose their jobs? I looked at her coldly. You should have expected this to happen. Everything that happened today is your own fault. After saying that, I didn't look at her again, turned around, pushed through the crowd and left quickly. Only Gu Siyao was left slumped on the cold ground. The crying was gradually drowned out by the noisy street noise. 13. When Gu Siyao returned to the office, Lise walked in angrily and questioned. Gu Siyao, you bitch, did you secretly go to see Zhao Heng again today? You are my woman now, do you still have any shame? Gu Siyao grabbed the pen holder on the desk and threw it over. I went to see Zhao Heng, what happened? You call me shameless, you useless piece of shit. You've almost bankrupted the company. Can you count how many contracts you've messed up? If Zhao Heng was still here, how could the company become like this? You're a loser. You just hang around me all day. Do you pay attention to your work? In the past, she disliked me because I only knew how to work and couldn't spend the whole day with her. Now Lise is around her all day, and she dislikes him for not working hard. How ridiculous. You only have Zhao Heng in your eyes now. What? Do you regret it? Don't forget who kicked him away in the first place. Don't you think it's ridiculous that you regret it now? Gu Siyao never thought that it was her own problem. Just as they were arguing fiercely, the secretary pushed the door in a panic. Boss Gu, something bad has happened. A dozen foreign women brought reporters to the company and made a scene, saying. The secretary paused, glanced at Lise, and lowered his voice a lot. Say. Mr. Li is a swindler of money and sex. If you don't hand him over today, I'll call the police. Gu Siyao's eyes widened instantly and she looked at Lise in disbelief. That look was like a sharp blade, as if it wanted to cut a few cuts on his body. Lise, what's going on? Explain it to me. Lise's face turned pale in an instant, and beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. His usual calm and relaxed demeanor disappeared without a trace. He stammered in defense. Siyao, this must be a misunderstanding. Someone is deliberately slandering me and wants to destroy our company. Misunderstanding. More than a dozen people and reporters have come to the company gate, and it's still a misunderstanding. Gu Siyao roared angrily, her chest heaving violently with anger. Who on earth did you offend? At this critical moment, the company is already shaky, and you have caused such a big mess for me. Li Zhe wanted to make a few more excuses. But the noise at the door was getting closer and closer. The foreign woman shouted loudly in not very fluent Chinese. The reporters' flashlights were also flashing non-stop. Gu Siyao took a deep breath, tried to calm herself down, and yelled to the secretary. What are you still standing there for? Stop them first and don't let them in. The secretary turned around in a hurry, but it was too late. The group of people rushed into the office. The foreign woman in the lead was tall and her eyes were full of anger and contempt. She glanced around and locked her eyes on Li Zhe, cursing at him in broken Chinese. Li Zhe, you liar. You said you loved me, but you tricked me into investing in your project and took away all my savings. Now you want to deny it? No way. The other women echoed this. You and I talked one after another, exposing Li Zhe's acts of defrauding money and sex clearly. The reporters were so excited that they kept handing the microphones forward and the flashlights made people dizzy. Gu Siyao just felt a buzzing in her head. The company image that she had worked so hard to build was completely destroyed at this moment. Gu Siyao didn't give up on Li Zhe in the end. In order to calm these crazy women down and prevent them from calling the police, she gritted her teeth and borrowed a large sum of money from private lenders to settle the matter. But the next day, the news of #GuS corporate executives defrauding money and sex hashtags still became a hot topic. The company's stock price, which had already hit rock bottom, plummeted again. It has become a complete junk stock. The company's shareholders and investors withdrew their capital one after another. Li Zhe became famous overnight. The company employees looked at him with contempt and ridicule. These looks severely hurt Li Zhe's poor self-esteem. He often loses his temper at work and fires anyone he dislikes. People in the company were in panic. Employees submit their resignation letters every day, and the once busy office area is now deserted. The company was left with only an empty shell and was completely bankrupt. Gu Siyao owed tens of millions of dollars in high-interest loans for Li Zhe. Gu Siyao was completely desperate. One night, while Li Zhe was sleeping, he stabbed him in the heart with a knife. Before Gu Siyao turned herself in, she found me. Ah Heng, I'm sorry, I really regret it. If I could do it again, I would definitely not choose Li Zhe. Because of him, my company, love, and life are all ruined. I know you love me very much, but I hurt you. I'm sorry, I know you and Luli are getting married, I sincerely wish you happiness. After going through so much, it was rare to see such sincerity in her eyes when she said this. After saying that, she turned and left. I knew this might be the last time I saw her in this life. I certainly didn't expect such an ending. I stared at her back in a daze for a long time. It wasn't until Luli hugged me tightly from behind that I came to my senses. Gu Siyao was sentenced to life imprisonment for intentional homicide. Luli and I eventually got married, and soon we had a pair of children. Our married life has been very sweet and we will be together until old age.